Ultra Space is one of the most interesting concepts to come out of a Pokemon game, although it's not one that's been explored to much extent, especially in the mainline titles. Fortunately, diving into the world of fan-made games presents us with Pokemon Nova. The first thing that caught my attention about this project was how little time it wastes showing you how open and free it is. A majority of the game takes place within massive open zone areas representing different realms of the Ultra Space. Even before you get a single Pokemon, the hub city can practically be explored to its near fullest extent. And this was really cool because I negatively reminisced on not really being able to go anywhere in the Ultra Space during the Alola games. And yeah, okay, the scenery of a single location might get repetitive as you continue venturing through it, yet it was significantly better and more worthwhile than the hallway simulators the official games gave us. What exactly are you doing in these big locations though? Well, your main goal is to track down the shards of Necrozma, as according to the people you work for, they've stolen the light from Ultra Megalopolis. But they're not exactly easy targets, so in the meantime, you'll mainly be working your way through Ultra Recon's ranking system. The process mostly includes filling the Pokedex, completing quests that usually just pertain to catching X number of Pokemon that are Y-type, and uncovering treasure. It's a very simple, but sometimes repetitive gameplay loop. Once you earn enough points from those tasks, you can participate in rank-up battles, allowing you to unlock new features. Surprisingly, you can actually go to the other biomes within the Ultra Space without progressing the main story, although I found that some of the physical space within them sometimes required a skill locked behind the previously stated rank-up battles. Other than the extremely polished visuals, this was the highlight of the game for me. Riding Solgaleo or Lunala into the Ultra Space, catching and defeating Pokemon while desperately avoiding those who would certainly obliterate my team, and conquering the various raid dens and locked chests. I do want to note that most of the battles, especially in the early game, were pretty effortless. I was walking into many of them a few levels over what was recommended, and I think that's mostly due to just how easy and fun it is to get lost in the Ultra Space's gameplay loop. It's genuinely not that big of a deal though. There's a lot of fun to have in this game outside of challenging fights, and you're going to have a good time if that's not what your main concern is either. A part of the game I do feel the need to criticize pertains to the story. Outside of the unique setting, the overall plot is pretty straightforward. There were some characters I liked, a few I didn't really care for. I don't think this is a game that's trying to tell an extremely deep and thought-provoking narrative. It does still take quite the nosedive at a certain point in the game. I'm not going to be specific because I think showing that on screen would spoil a lot of the second half of the game's content, and there's one character in particular who has some really off-putting dialogue that made me feel pretty uncomfortable, especially due to their relationship with the player character. As a whole, I want to say the story is a solid 7 out of 10 experience that's brought down a couple points because of some interactions that kind of just kill the vibe. Outside of that, the game is still very well presented visually. I don't doubt a lot of effort went into its development, and other than a few balance issues, the gameplay loop is pretty fun and consistent. Before moving on, I wanted to quickly talk about the sponsor of today's video, Dokimonster's Quest, a monster taming game that combines the charm and retro appeal of older titles with the quality of life and design philosophy of newer ones. You'll set foot into the world of Zelos, inhabited by over 140 unique monsters. But as you catch, train, and even battle other rangers, it quickly becomes clear that something is very wrong. Giant corporations that seek to disrupt the peace of this beautiful world, and beyond that, who knows what other mystical obstacles you'll encounter. But don't let the older look of this game fool you. As I mentioned before, Dokimonster's Quest offers many quality of life features, like the ability to modify your monster stat points, or even speed up the battles. Noticeable systems that make the experience much smoother, but don't exactly require extra investment. Something I admire the most about this game though is the developer's desire to continue improving it. Despite being almost 2 years old, there have been many free updates provided to the player, even as recent as just last month. Between the main story and DLC content, Dokimonster's Quest has a huge adventure waiting for you. The game is also just released on Xbox, adding yet another way to access this experience. Be sure to pick it up while it's on sale until July 10th, and thank you to Dokimonster's Quest for sponsoring this video. Did you know that Infinite Fusion, the game where you fuse Pokemon together, has a sequel? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you did, it's kind of been all over YouTube, but I'm sure you still have a lot of questions about what kind of improvements or new features they've added, and how good the game is compared to the original. While a lot of people enjoy the goofy and silly aspects of fusions, my personal favorite thing to do in the original was taking Pokemon and finding their perfect fusion partners. Whether it be covering their core weaknesses, or even just providing a new move or ability, it's a concept that the sequel has not at all failed to deliver. The fusion gameplay is still as good as it was in the original, probably even better now that there are more Pokemon. So with that said, I'm not going to be discussing that side of its gameplay for the entire segment, as I don't think there's a ton to talk about that you haven't already heard before. A really fun addition this sequel has brought about are overworld encounters, and considering all the fan projects I've played with the system, I think this one is one of the most detailed I've ever seen. This system also plays into the fusion gimmick, as occasionally you'll find the silhouette of a Pokemon that happens to be a wild fusion. One of my biggest pet peeves with the original, though, was that it took place in Kanto, the most overused region in Pokemon fan projects. And hearing the sequel was going to take place in the second most overused region, I got pretty disappointed. But compared to the first game, the sequel adds a lot of unique ways you can explore and interact with the region. First of all, the world is littered with quests, a lot of which had a lot more depth to them than I expected. And speaking of depth, the rematch system was really interesting. NPC trainers can randomly catch Pokemon based on the time of day, fuse Pokemon at random, and even allow you to manually add Pokemon to their team by trading with them. Lastly, the overall look of the game is substantially better than the previous. I think the battle backgrounds would look a little bit better with different or just entirely without the base plates holding up the Pokemon, but that's not much more than a nitpick. Infinite Fusion 2 has only 3 gyms in the recently released demo, so either keep note of it or jump in right now, because like most newer fan games, your save file can be transferred to future updates. I'm honestly kind of surprised how little Gen 2 hacks, or Generation 2 in general, focuses on time travel, which isn't something I actually realized until I recently picked up Crystal Inheritance. This is a very new, completed Pokemon ROM hack, and it uses the concept of time travel in a really interesting way to essentially create 2 versions of the Johto region. The present, which according to your elders has been invaded by technology, and in order to prevent that, you visit the past, that just so happens to be as, if not more dangerous than the present. The world when you first start the game will look quite small, yet when you take time travel into account, it becomes much larger. I personally didn't really enjoy the writing myself, but I'm going to chalk that up to simply a difference of opinion. The story felt well put together, and the pacing of each time period's progression didn't seem too fast or too slow. I guess I've just had a harder time enjoying stories that take place that far back in the past, whether it be Pokemon or not. What I did really like was the customization, QOL, and other improvements the hack uses to enhance its gameplay. First of all, this game was built off of Polished Crystal, or the Polished Crystal engine, of course with permission from the developers. This means you'll have things like visual indicators for move typing, abilities, and a more modern PC UI. I've stated in previous videos how much I like that hack in particular because of how well polished it is without interrupting Generation 2's art style. The beginning of the game also hands you a couple options to customize your experience, nothing super crazy, just 2 pages of things that most people would want control over. You can also buy as many rare candies and max repels from the mart as you'd like, which I thought was worth mentioning. One very interesting design choice I wanted to bring up is the removal of baby Pokemon, which wasn't something I noticed until a few hours into the game, nor does it seem to be specifically stated in the hack's feature list, yet in execution, I didn't really mind it. Baby Pokemon are cute, but I'm going to be honest, they're kind of useless, other than like Elekid, and are often a chore to evolve compared to your other options at that point in the game. Overall, Inheritance was pretty good, and I definitely recommend it to anyone looking for a more unique story in a Pokemon ROM hack. At this point in the video, I would really appreciate it if you were to subscribe if you haven't already. I upload at least twice a week talking about the newest Pokemon fan project releases, or sometimes even older titles I thought were worth bringing to your attention. Have you ever wondered what a Pokemon game would look like inside of a prison? No? Well, me neither, but in execution, it's pretty dang good. Pokemon Conviction follows the story of a prisoner who has just arrived at North Spire Penitentiary, an inescapable place from which few ever return. Yet, because this is a Pokemon game, it's not nearly as restrictive as you might expect. On your first night, your cellmate offers you a choice between 3 Pokemon, and before long, most of the series' early gameplay loop is replicated. The prison, obviously, isn't the size of a normal region, though it is pretty large. You have many different locations harboring a wide variety of Pokemon. One positive that does come from its scale is a lack of backtracking or needing to unlock some kind of fast travel. Not long after your quote-unquote adventure, I guess I'll call it, begins, will you start to understand the unique mechanics of the prison. Many elements of the plot seem to be heavily tied to a reputation system, measuring your likeness with the various gangs and even the warden of the prison itself. It also isn't uncommon that you'll be forced to lower reputation with one faction in order to raise it with another. Even outside of the main story, there are many quests you can complete to obtain useful items, and especially Pokemon. To actually progress, however, you'll need to face off against tag holders, inmates and guards who are recognized as powerful Pokemon wielders. They're basically gym leaders who don't entirely follow the monotype rule. But how exactly did you get into this prison in the first place? Outside of the cold stone walls of North Spire exists an entire story to be told, a region placed under strict control. The idea that peace comes at the cost of freedom. You were placed here for committing one of the most heinous crimes within this state, treason, assisting a rebel in their attempt to escape capture. During your currently indefinite stay, you'll uncover more about this region the prison resides in and how you could play a part in its future. This isn't just a Pokemon game with a prison escape gimmick. It has an entire story to be told. With that said, this is not a game I'd suggest to a younger audience or someone looking for a lighthearted experience. The story is a dark one, especially within the dialogue of random NPCs. But it is a good one, and it does take itself very seriously. Finally, despite taking place within a prison, there are a hefty amount of QOL features. You might question whether it breaks the harsh and restrictive environment of the setting, yet I personally believe they exist to lessen grinding, so you can focus more on the game's more unique mechanics. Pokemon Conviction currently has 3 tag holders, aka gym leaders, taking you to the mid-level 30s. If you're craving a unique, dark story and aren't afraid of unfinished games, I highly recommend it. Alright, so the next 3 I'm going to be talking about I have much less to say about compared to the first few, and that's for a different reason regarding each of them. But none of them are because I had a negative experience. Actually, I think all 3 are pretty good. The first one is Fire of Sky. This is a very short game about a boy and his Growlithe traveling the world after their family met a brutal end. I really like this hack's art style and the challenging gameplay bits, but it is really short. Give it a try if you want to kill an hour, but don't expect an extensive experience. Next up is Pokemon Grim. This game caught my attention with how colorful and alive its world felt. Not only was the art style very coherent, the overworld encounters made progressing through routes very delightful. The combat was also pretty fun thanks to the wide variety of Pokemon. The only thing I felt iffy about was the story, and how it played out quite similar to many I've played in the past. Considering this demo only goes up to the 3rd gym though, I am hopeful that could be resolved in the future. And the last honorable mention is Crippling Medical Debt. Yes, that is the name of this hack. What does it entail, you might ask? Well, after getting hit by a truck without health insurance, you need to travel the region, conquering its league so that you can afford to pay off your medical debt. Jokes aside, this hack seems pretty well put together. It's Hoenn's routes and towns rearranged as a familiar real-world place, and the Pokemon variety is pretty good. Oh, and there's also a quote-unquote convenience menu you can pull up with RB plus start. It is a completed hack. The only reason it sits here is because I honestly didn't have too much to say about it. You do have a custom region and story, they just weren't ones that piqued my interest for more than a few hours. For a long while, I always had a hard time answering the question of what makes a Pokemon fan game story good. Yeah, I guess you could say good writing and well-paced story arcs, but that sounds way too broad and isn't going to be much of any help, if at all. It wasn't until I played Miragia's Traveler, a game almost entirely developed by one person, did I finally understand. Miragia puts you in the shoes of a rookie at the Trainer Union, a place not so much dedicated dedicated to defeating gym leaders and collecting their badge, rather protecting the region and the Pokemon who inhabit it. Okay, but what was I talking about before? The special thing that makes the story so worthwhile? Oh right, the characters. In most Pokemon fan games I've played, you usually have 1 to 2 rivals, the professor who might be relevant, and the admins or leaders of the antagonist group. Miragia, on the other hand, has a very wide yet also manageable cast of characters. Characters that consistently join you on missions, cause you issues on the job, or are just lingering in the open. You will almost never feel like your player character is on their own, which I think is what separates a good fan game story from an average one. And like I said before, keeping track of each character's name and personality is a very manageable thing to do, especially since they come with their own mugshots above each line of dialogue. Okay, but story aside, I think this game also has one of the more interesting, ways you'll be exploring the world. The Trainer Union sort of acts like a hub for the entire region. Rather than progressing in a straight line, ranking up in the story unlocks new subregions for you to explore. And these maps are really fun to progress through. They hold a lot of rare items, Pokemon, optional bosses, and sometimes even an entrance to a hidden location you would have missed otherwise. Going back to the story real quick, I actually want to talk about how this game replaces gyms as its core progression. The thing that'll be taking up most of your time outside of the Trainer Union is completing quests. Kinda reminds me of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, where in between story beats you take on tasks from the job board, except the ones of this game are more handcrafted and rarely ever feel like filler content. Once you complete enough of those jobs, you'll then be rewarded with the ability to rank up, unlocking new areas, as I described before, and a lot of other stuff. Miragia's Traveler isn't a 100% completed game, but the currently available content is very, very long. But that's just about going to wrap up this video. Thank you to my channel members for their continuous support, and have a nice rest of your day.